Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode, which, according to Kyle, is episode number 379 of Sunday Night Live, right here on JonnyLipshamStudios.co.uk, here in the southeast corner of Scotland. And of course, Scotland is the capital of literally everything, including all dimensions, especially dimensions that have not yet been discovered yet. We're already there. Because we rule. All right, everybody, welcome. I hope everybody has had a good weekend so far. I'm just going to move my chair just a little closer because I feel like I'm like miles away from the mic here. Sorry about that. We appear to have better camera quality. Yeah, the camera certainly looks better than it did on Wednesday, where it was definitely blurred, and I couldn't fix it. I don't know why it was blurred, and I don't know why it was not doing as it was told. Not doing as it was told when I was trying to fix it, but it seems to be fixed for now, so I don't know what the story was there. But hopefully it looks a lot better at your end compared to mine. Mine, it looks actually fine. So hopefully it looks good for you guys. So, let's go see who is here. Billy Morgan, of course, was first in the door pretty much right after I made the stream set up in YouTube. He pretty much was the first one to arrive. We've got Ron, the keyman, here as well, and his he says Ariana is now the proud owner of a Fender Mustang amp, which is cool. That's awesome. The Mustang amps are actually really, really awesome. They are amazing. I don't have one, but I have had a chance to play on them and test them when I was over in Hamburg last year. There were a couple of Mustangs. There were like 3 or 4 Mustangs that I could play on, and of course there were Rumble amps there as well. So it was great. I got to play on those. And yeah, they are very, very handy for distortion and that kind of thing. You can really crank them. They're amazing amps. Let's see who else is here. Neil Thompson is here. Tony Stringer is also here. Kyle, who I mentioned earlier, is also here. And we got Keith from Radio Talk Frumpet as well. And he's also telling us that Kyle is also saying that Billy's Studio One meetup is right after this show. So if you want to carry on the conversation about Studio One and ask some more questions and talk more about features and that kind of stuff, you can do that over at the Studio One meetup, which follows immediately after this show, which Billy Morgan will be hosting. So that would be the place to go if you want to do that. Kyle says, remember to give Johnny the finger. I mean, click the like button. Thank you, Kyle. In your inimitable style. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. And we got Dave from Pops NY as well. And we got Jeff Clark in the house, one of my favorite bass players. And I mean that quite sincerely, and I mean that very honestly. Jeff is definitely one of my favorite bass players. So I am very glad he is here. He has not been in here for quite some time, and I am glad you are here, my friend. I hope, excuse me. I hope you are doing well and having a good time gigging and stuff like that. I've seen that you've been on the road and things like that recently, so I hope that's been going well for you, Jeff. Billy says audio and video is good. excellent. That's what I like to hear and read. That's awesome. Just Bob says, maybe your house is built over an ancient red shank burial ground, and that explains camera glitching. Unlikely, being that we're in Scotland. It's much more likely that our house is on a development that was built over the top of coal mine workings. That's probably more likely. So it could be, I don't know, it could be something to do with radon gas. I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. Whatever it was weird. It's happened a couple of times actually where I've been in Discord and used my camera in Discord where it will just blur and I have to turn the camera off and restart the camera and then it's fine. So not sure what's going on there. It appears to be the camera or the camera software that's the problem. But yeah, it's a weird one. All right, so and Jeff says, jazz. Yes, that's what I do. I do jazz. I do blues, I do R&B, but I also do funk and I do some soul as well. But yeah, jazz is kind of my my homeland, so to speak. Having been into jazz since I was 2 or 3 years old. Because I can remember I must have been about 2 years old when Buddy Rich put out an album called Time Check. And it was that record that totally blew my mind. And I was just like, that music, I want to play that. And I really would like to play drums. And then, of course, Steely Dan's Asia came out in the same year. And I heard Steve Gadd play that awesome solo on the title track. And I was just like, oh, heck yes, I definitely want to do that. And so I immediately set about trying to find out how I could get into playing drums. Fortunately, my dad and his dad were both drummers. So there was plenty of drum gear kicking about the house or the garage. And so I was well able to just go and grab a pair of drumsticks and a snare drum and just set it up in my bedroom and just play. My dad showed me how to hold the sticks. He showed me right-handed. I'm not right-handed. Couldn't play this way, so I said, well, okay, let's try it this way. And yeah, left-handed is the way. And I learned traditional grip. From, going to gigs when I was a kid and seeing all sorts of amazing drummers, including Steve Gadd. And Buddy Rich, I think we saw in 1983, I think. And yeah, Buddy Rich, Steve Gadd, and then much later on, people like Dave Weckl and Dennis Chambers totally blew my mind. So yes, I started out as a drummer and I started playing bass when I was 10 years old because my mother was a bass player and vocalist and comedian. She's pretty much an all-round entertainer, but yeah, she's an okay bass player. And so she had a Fender Jazz bass, and it just happened to be in the closet, and I discovered it, and I started playing it, and I liked it, and so my mother let me play it, and yeah, I got pretty decent at it. I'm not like, the world's greatest bass player by any stretch of the imagination. I'm decent. Jaco Pastorius is probably the bass player that has most influenced me, but I would also say among that list of most influential bass players that have taught me a lot about bass playing, I would include Ron Carter and Christian McBride on that list of exceedingly amazing bass players that have totally blown my mind. And of course, Victor Wooten. Victor Wooten has to be on everybody's bass playing list, to be honest. And so, and of course, being that I'm a Steely Dan fan, as you can see from my t-shirt, you've got to be into Chuck Rainey. Chuck Rainey, probably one of the most recorded bass players in history. along with, people like Anthony Jackson. Anthony Jackson is a wonderful bass player. He's one of my faves as well. What about Sid Vicious? I never really got into that particular type of music, so I don't know a lot about Sid Vicious as a musician, to be honest. Unfortunately. But hello, Sean. Good to see you, mate. I'm glad you're here. And we had a really nice chat at the UK Studio One meetup, which was great. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I'm glad you're able to make it as well. So, Pino Palladino is another great bass player. Who I admire a lot. Sean says he's met Chuck a couple of times. Very nice, down-to-earth guy. Yeah, I've heard that a lot, actually. That seems to be the prevailing reputation for Chuck, actually, is that he's just a really nice, down-to-earth kind of guy. Yes, and I am naming all the greats. Yeah, I haven't actually met that many, like, great bass, really, really great bass players. Victor Wooten I've met. Ron Carter I've met. John Patitucci I have also met. John is a very, very nice guy. He and I talked for a good 30 minutes, which, given a guy of his stature, I thought, that was pretty unheard of. But he had a lot of time for people, which impressed me a lot. But yeah, John Patitucci is a very nice guy. I met him at Bass Day UK. Oh gosh, 1995, I think that was. Chuck was actually one of the artists at Bass Day that year, but I never got to meet him, unfortunately. But that's the reputation he has, apparently. That Chuck is a really, really great guy. I would like to meet him one day. So who knows? Let's see. Okay, so if you have questions about Studio One, or you're experiencing a problem in Studio One, we can talk about that here tonight. That's what this show is all about. So Studio One, but also I'll take questions on recording, mixing, mastering, just kind of broadly. If you've got a particular thing you want to talk about, that's what tonight's show is all about. I take your questions, I try and provide an answer to the best of my ability. So if you've got questions about Studio One, get them in the chat just now. And the best way to ask a question is to start by typing at Jonny Lipsham Studios. If you do that, that highlights my name in red and it helps me quickly and easily identify a question from basically the chat, because I love it when you guys talk amongst yourselves and get to know each other. Because I'm very proud of the community that we've built here on this channel. It's great, it's fantastic, and you guys know each other pretty well. It's great, I love it. So please do keep talking amongst yourselves and that kind of thing. But if you've got a question, start with at Jonny Lipsham Studios, and then I can pick questions out nice and easily. That helps me a lot. And as Kyle has already said, please do hit the like button as well if you like what I do here on this channel. And if you like this show, hit the like button. Helps me out a lot. If you are currently not subscribed and you're watching and you'd like to get involved in the conversation in the chat and you'd like to ask a question, hit the subscribe button. And then after 2 minutes, after having hit the subscribe button, you'll be good to go. You'll be able to get into the chat because the chat is in subscriber mode only. And if you're wondering why that is, well, a while back, we had some people who came into these shows and they just started spamming and posting some pretty awful stuff. And Sean says Jonny will hear the red since he can't see it. That is correct. I am one of those people that is completely colorblind, but I also have a condition which is actually less rare than you think, called synesthesia. And what that means is that my brain interprets visual images such as colors in a different way because I don't see the colors. So my brain has to interpret that information in a totally different way. And so it does. I hear the color. Some people taste sound. That's another way in which synesthesia works. People, they put on a record and they taste the music. It's weird. Synesthesia is one of the weirdest things that there is. But it's really quite profound how the brain works in interpreting information that it receives. And sometimes it can get a little cross-wired, and sometimes it actually works to compensate for a sense that you don't have. For example, if you're blind, your sense of hearing becomes incredibly powerful and incredibly strong to the point where you can hear reflections off a wall and know that there's a wall there, so you know not to walk into it and things like that. And your sense of smell and all of that gets enhanced as well. So yeah, the senses are amazing, and the way the brain works is amazing too. Kyle says, does anyone want JL to cover the signal flow through a channel? That's a good question. And Billy Morgan is just reiterating there how to do the Jonny Lipsham Studios thing. So yes, you type the symbol before Jonny Lipsham Studios, and it highlights my name in red. I can see it now. I can see it, hear it, whatever you want to call it, in red. And that's handy. It just makes it easier for me to pick out questions. So please do that. Neil says, Songwriting Simplified, which is on Wednesdays, the Songwriting and Music Theory show. Sunday Night Live is the Studio One DAW and General Technical show. That is correct, Neil. Thank you very much for kind of spelling out the differences between the two live streams that I do. But sometimes, if there's a dearth of questions, I will easily switch between the two. If nobody's asking any questions, I'd rather do that. I'd rather have something to talk about than end the show early. Because this is meant to be an hour-long show, and I would much rather if it was an hour of answering your questions than not, really. So, if you would like me to talk about signal flow in Studio One, I'd be very happy to talk about it. Because it's actually pretty straightforward in Studio One. It's dead easy to understand, or at least I think it is. I have used pretty much most DAWs that there are available in the world today. I've used Pro Tools because I have worked in some major label studios where Pro Tools is the thing. That's what they use. But I've also used Logic. I have used Cubase. In fact, I've used Cubase extensively because I used it for, many, many years. I used it for about 30 years or so before I actually switched over to Studio One back in 2013. So, we're into 12 years of Studio One now. So I'm pretty familiar with signal flow, and most DAWs do it in a very, very similar way. They might have different nomenclature for different things, like in Pro Tools, everything is an aux channel if it's not an actual audio channel or a MIDI channel. So in Pro Tools, you have MIDI channels, audio channels, and aux channels. And aux channels basically are just channels that do kind of everything else. So you can use them as a reverb, an effect, like an effects return, basically, or you can use them as a bus channel. So in Pro Tools, that's what they call them. In Cubase, the nomenclature is similar, but I think, if I remember correctly, they don't have MIDI channels. They're called instrument channels. If I remember correctly. It's, like I said, it's been like 12 or nearly 13 years or so since I last used Cubase. And I think that's correct, unless they've changed that in the intervening years, which of course they may have done. They may have, just totally stumped me right there, and they may have changed how that works. So signal flow is something that I understand quite well in Studio One. So Let's talk about that at least briefly. So if we go over here, and my camera's not on, there we go. So you can see I've got the level meter here, Joe Gilder style, for putting it in K20 mode. I do this because I like to use the K system developed by Gary Katz, for basically giving me a good amount of headroom when I'm mixing, so that I basically never clip the main output or the master fader, whichever you want to call it. So signal flow, how does it work? Well, this is the intro music that you just listened to at the start of the show. And basically what we have here is just audio tracks and a reverb. And that's all we got. So this is a really simple little song. If I had another song, I could probably show you something that has a mixture of instrument tracks and audio. In fact, why don't I do that? Give me 1 second. Let's go in and select something else instead, because this will show you kind of a little bit more extensive routing as well. So let's go and do that. So let's go and open up this one. So this one is the song that I did for the last Halloween challenge, which is called Bagpipe Murder, which I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I call it Bagpipe Murder. For all the bagpipe players in my family, of which there are several, I dedicate this song entirely to them. And then it's kind of up to them whether it's the bagpipes themselves that are being murdered in this piece or the bagpipe player. Kind of up to you. All right, so what we have here is we have some instrument tracks here with the little keyboard icon, and then the little wave icon here is for audio. And then if we move down here, we've got one effects channel here. And then we got some buses at the end. All right, so how does this all work? So let's deal with audio tracks first, because they are arguably a little bit more straightforward. You can see the routing in this section here. And you can also see the input and the outputs. So these instrument tracks are coming from the presence instrument, and you can see which instances of presence are involved. And then if you click on this little icon here, it will open the instrument editor, and then you'll be able to see what preset is selected for this particular channel, and so on and so forth. So signal flow for audio starts at the event level here. So let's talk about this piano track here. In fact, let's just solo this guy up. And you can hear what this is going to do in just a second when I play it. But we've got this piano track with these 3 little events, and it doesn't do a whole lot in this particular tune. So let's go back over to the mixer. And what we'll see here is that this is coming into input right on my interface. So basically the audio comes in from input right, and then it goes through the inserts, and then it gets split, literally like a Y cable, split into a couple of different directions. A copy is being sent to the reverb, and then it is also being routed after it's gone through this. So basically it comes in here, in the sends, it gets split. So a copy gets sent to the reverb, the effects channel, and then the main part of it goes through into the keys bus. Keys bus is over here, and then the keys bus goes out to the main output here. And we can see by clicking on this what is being routed, depending upon which way you prefer to say it, to these bus channels. Very handy that you can click on these and you can now see what's going where. So I like this, that you can do this. Now, Some people like to color code their buses one way or the other. I color them red. And some people like to color them yellow. Like, I have friends that color them yellow because they say, hey, buses are yellow. So, you know, buses in the real world, an actual bus in the real world is yellow. So he makes his bus channels yellow. Here in Scotland, they can have different liveries, different color schemes. So, but in London, a lot of buses are red. So I like to make my buses red. Not necessarily specifically for that reason. It's just, I think it's just a handy color to have my buses colored red. But you do you, you know, whatever color suits you, is the one that you should go for. My main out is this kind of greeny color. And my effects channel is also this kind of greeny color as well. And then I have, these are, this kind of purpley color is because all of these are effects. These are Foley effects, audio tracks. And so that's what these are. So let's go back over to the piano. Where's the piano? Where's my piano? Here it is. So I have an instance here of rotor on here, which you would normally associate with a Leslie, which is why it kind of looks like a Leslie cabinet. And so what happens here is the signal comes in from input right, and it goes into the rotor here, and then from the rotor, like I said, it gets split. So the affected signal also goes out to the reverb. Now you can see here that this send color is this kind of bluish kind of color. But if I click on here, this turns on or off the pre-fader. And this goes to Dave's question. He says, what about the advantage / disadvantage of running effects at pre-fader? Now, for me, it's not really an advantage or disadvantage either way. They serve different purposes. So, for example, all of these ones are pre-fade. These are all pre-fader, right? So what that means is these sends are, the Y cable is happening before the audio, they're post-fader. If they were orange, they'd be pre-fader. My fault. So these are all post-fader, which means the Y split is happening after the fader. So if you imagine the audio coming top down, then it gets to the fader, then it gets split out. Like that Y cable I talked about. So that Y cable is happening after the fader. So basically, if you move the fader, it's going to adjust how much is being sent. Basically, if I turn this down, then nothing will get sent to the room reverb. Even though I've got the room reverb send level set here, if I turn that fader down, nothing's going to go. However, if I was to set this to, if I was to engage this like this, so now it's in pre-fader mode. So what does that mean? That means that that Y split is now happening before the audio hits the fader. So the copy is being sent to my room reverb before it hits the fader. So that means that regardless of what I do to the fader here, even if I turn it all the way down to the bottom, this send level of minus 22.5 dB is always going to go to my reverb, regardless of what I do. So, for example, when do I use pre-fader mode? I use pre-fader mode if I want to do parallel processing. So, for example, if I was doing a rock mix or a funk mix or something like that, then what I would do is I would do some parallel processing on most of my my buses. So what I would do is I would have everything routed to buses, and then those buses would also be routed to via sends rather than direct routing to another set of buses, which I call parallel buses. And so what happens then is they are all sent pre-fader to these parallel buses. So that Y is happening before the fader, and it goes to, the copy goes to my parallel buses, and then my parallel buses have compressors on them where I'm doing some very, very, very intense and very aggressive compression, which I then blend in with the main buses. And what that does is that gives me a lot of punch, a lot of power, a lot of transient, which is what I want in something that's more rock or more funk orientated. I want, the transients to really, slap the listener in the face, really. And so parallel processing does that. It makes everything that I want to have that parallel processing, kind of a little bit more upfront, and they kind of pop out the speakers a wee bit. Not doing this on this because this is kind of an orchestral work, so not going to do that. No parallel processing here, which is why everything here is, all the effects are post-fader. And post-fader is the default in Studio One. Other DAWs have it different, where it's pre-fader by default, and you have to put it into post-fader mode by clicking on a toggle button, much like this. It's just in reverse. And so that's kind of what I do. So for me, pre-fader sends, post-fader sends. It's not whether there's an advantage or there's a disadvantage to either. They serve different purposes. So if I want to send something to an effect or to do some parallel processing, I'm going to, and I want it to happen before the fader, then I'm going to do a pre-fader send. But if I do it by default as it is in post-fader mode, and it doesn't matter about whether the effects are affected by the fader levels, then it's going to be post-fader. So for most work like this orchestral piece, it's always going to be post-fader for sends to reverbs and things like that. However, there may be a certain circumstance where actually what I want is I want something to sound very distant and very far away. So what I might do in that instance, for example, with this piano part, let's say if we just play this piano part so you can hear what it sounds like. All right, so that's what that sounds like. Now, let's say I didn't want any of the direct audio at all. All I wanted was the reverb. And then I wanted to crank the reverb with a lot of gain. Then that would be an occasion where I would do a pre-fader send to an effects return on an effects channel, and I would crank the gain on that so that, and then I'd turn the fader down. So you don't hear the direct sound, you only hear the affected sound. And that can have a unique, kind of very distant, very ethereal kind of sound. Especially if you then run it like this is going through something like the rotors, where you can just totally, mangle the sound of a piano, which is kind of what this is doing here. So if I set that into context with what's going on in the piece, at that point you'll see kind of what I mean. So basically that was just like building up some tension before we get into the big discordant brass hits with their sforzando swells, stuff like that. So so I could, I guess, change this into a pre-fader mode and then turn down the main fader, then all you'd hear is the affected return. You wouldn't actually hear the direct sound at all. So that would be an instance where there is an advantage to a pre-fader send rather than a post-fader send, because it allows me to do that kind of thing. Whereas if I did it as a post-fader, it wouldn't work. So I hope that has answered that question for you. That's a great question there, actually, Dave. Jeff says Cakewalk uses instrument channels. Neil says Studio One calls the MIDI tracks instrument tracks, at least from what I remember. Yes, it does. It calls them instrument tracks. Correct. Dwayne says, would you talk about how signals flow through D1 when attached to Studio Live multi-channel digital mix board? Each channel in Studio One has corresponding channel in mix board. I can't actually speak to that because yes, I do have a Studio Live mixer, but I'm not using it in the way you're describing. I'm using it strictly as a DAW controller. So there's no inputs, there's no outputs, there's nothing connected to my mixer. I'm literally just using it in DAW mode because that's kind of why I got it, really. It was sent to me by PreSonus way back. This is like before I even started working for PreSonus. They sent it to me to test DAW mode, which was the new thing that was going to be coming for the Studio Live mixers. This is way back 2016, I think, so maybe like 9 years ago. And so DAW mode was going to be, the big thing because, hey, there's a DAW button on the mixers and we need to make sure that that works. So that we could basically give a third way in which the Studio Live mixers work. One is it's a live sound mixer. It's also an interface. It's also a DAW controller. So I use this as a DAW controller. I don't use it as an interface. I've got a Quantum HD that does that beautifully. So don't need to use it as an interface. And this never leaves the studio. So, and I don't do live sound. I've not done live sound in years. It's going to be like 18 years since I last did any live sound. And that was not on a Studio Live mixer. 18 years ago, I think it was as a Soundcraft mixer, if I remember correctly. So I've never used a Studio Live mixer as a live mixer. I've only ever used it as a DAW controller. I am definitely not an expert on that. If you want to find out more about using the Studio Live mixers, and if you want to actually talk to a real expert, one of my real good friends, probably one of my best friends in the company at PreSonus is Richard Gaspard. Richard Gaspard is a Studio Live genius. That guy is an expert in the Studio Live ecosystem. And he knows those mixes better than pretty much anybody else. My boss, Jonny Doyle, who is he's the PreSonus Europe technical support manager, so he's my boss. But he also is the Studio Live sound support manager as well. So he does all the technical support for the Studio Live mixers. So he is also an expert in those. And you will be able to find him in the Studio Live Series 3 users Facebook group. So if you're on Facebook, you can go and ask in there and you'll get an answer either from Richard or you'll get an answer from Jonny Doyle. And if you don't get an answer from either of those two, there's a guy called Hans in there who also knows his way around Studio Live mixes very, very well. He's a great help. Back in the day when we had the PreSonus forum, he was a real asset in the Studio Live forum there as well. So yeah, those are going to be your experts to talk to. I really, unfortunately, am not an expert in the Studio Live mixers. I'm just not. Joe Gilder, he uses his as an interface. So if you're wanting to find out more about using the Studio Live mixer as an interface mode in Studio One, you can talk to him as well. So that's another option because he actually uses his as an interface. Dave Barcelow is here, which is cool. Glad he is here. Neil says, if you don't want any of that channel's future fader changes to affect that particular send level, make it pre-fader. Yes, exactly right. And apparently it is Dave Barcelow's birthday today. So let's go back over here and we can do this. This is for you, Dave. Let's do this on the Steinway Concert Grand. Why not? There you go. Happy birthday, mate. I hope you're having a good one. Dave says, when I was running a Live 32, the Facebook was very responsive with questions. Yes, it really is. Just Bob says, maybe your boss would make a great guest to explain Studio Live mixers and what can be used for. I think Richard Gaspard is probably the best. If I could get him as a guest, he would probably be the best option because he is one of our product specialists, and that's his job. Really, is to talk about the Studio Live mixers. And so for that purpose, if you go onto the Presonus YouTube channel, there is a playlist for the Studio Live mixers, and all the videos are done by him. And he goes into very great depth over all the features and functionality, including like things like all the routing, the flex mixes, all of that stuff. So if you want to learn about signal flow and routing and stuff like that for the Studio Live mixers, Richard Gaspard's playlist is going to be the place for you to go, to be really honest. It's great. His videos are superb. They're short, they are concise, and he's a really good communicator as well. And, you know, he is, I think, trying very hard to replace our former Studio Live product manager, who was Ray Tansen, for having the most epic beard in the company. I'm pretty sure that's what he is trying to do. Neil says, Richard Gaspard has been lately putting out a video per week on the Studio Live mixers with Studio One. Yes, he has. He's been really fantastic at kind of vitalizing interest in the Studio Live mixers. So very well worth checking out the videos that he does. And like Neil said, his output is pretty regular as well for the Presonus YouTube channel. Matt Cochran's here. Hello, he says, in large capital letters. Hello to you too. I hope you're doing well. Let's see. Jeff says he likes it. Very cinematic. Oh, you're talking about this guy. Yeah. It was designed to be cinematic, actually. It was designed for two things. Number one, to be scary, because it's meant to be a Halloween thing, but I also wanted it to be cinematic. You know, kind of what I was thinking about was kind of like a black and white 1930s, 1940s whodunit kind of murder mystery kind of film. Maybe kind of like one of the Sherlock Holmes movies, maybe, was with Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes, something like that. But there's also comedy in it as well. Like, for example, this is what happens to the bagpipe player or the bagpipes. It's up to you. It's your interpretation. Have a listen to this, and then maybe you could say in the chat whether you think it's the bagpipe player that gets brutally murdered or whether it's the bagpipes themselves that get brutally murdered. Check it out. So there you go. That's the first wee bit of bagpipe murder. So yeah, it's up to you whether it's the bagpipe player that gets murdered or whether it's the bagpipes themselves that get murdered. Whatever you think it is, there's no right or wrong answer. It's your interpretation. But yeah, now the fun part about this piece was the sound effects. So if I go over to the sound effects bus here, and if I solo this up, you'll hear there's all sorts of stuff going on here. So what we got here is we've got a thunderstorm, and we got this weird kind of pitched down sample of a baby laughing on a couple of channels here, and then we've got the rather violent sounding stabbing. There's the stabbing sound. And of course, we've got the bagpipes. Why is that not soloed? Hang on. And we've also got some footsteps. So whoever is the villain who either kills the bagpipe player or the bagpipes, you hear him walking away and then laughing kind of manically about what he has done. All of those sounds came from the splice integration that we now have in Studio One 7. So all of those came from the splice library, because there is a whole section on Foley sounds, and there are hundreds of thousands of amazing Foley sounds, including this thunderstorm, which was a thunderstorm captured in Nashville. And it sounds great, and it's nice and long, and it's perfectly loopable as well. So you can make it just sound like a continuous thunderstorm, and you don't hear the join, which is what I like about it. And then, like I said, there's the footsteps, and there's all sorts of other stuff there too. But yeah, so I'm glad you liked it, Jeff, actually. Neil says, random personal fact. Richard Gaspard is actually the very first Persona staff that I ever communicated with before I ever got Studio One or any hardware. Richard is a great guy. No question about that. He's fantastic. And, he's really great to talk to. And he will easily sell you Persona's gear and Studio One without you realizing that you've been sold it, to be honest. he's just a natural salesperson. Love it. Dave Barslow, oh no, hang on, let's go back up a bit. Jeff Clark says the bagpiper was murdered by the butler in the study with a candlestick. Oh, gotta love the Cluedo reference there. We call it Cluedo here. You guys call it Clue. I don't know why. You crazy Americans. Dave Barslow says, I would say the pipes got murdered because that drop out fast and not like a murmur. Okay, that's an interesting perspective. Kind of like that. Dave says, was it the banjo player, the accordionist, perhaps the cow who is the suspect? That's funny. Let's see. Secret Squirrel is here. Hello, welcome back. It's been a while since we've seen you, so I'm glad you're here. Neil says, of course, trust the Scot to include bagpipes in the horror soundtrack. Well, it's got to be done, mate. It's got to be done. And You know, it is kind of like the national instrument. And I'm one of those weird Scots who really does not like the sound of bagpipes at all. I would much prefer a tenor saxophone to bagpipes any day of the week. I would, you know, if there's somebody standing on a street corner and they're playing Michael Brecker tunes or John Coltrane or Sonny Stitt tunes or anything like that, I will gladly drop money into their sax case on the floor in front of them, but I'm going to walk as fast as I can away from bagpipes. Let's see. That's funny. I heard they were going to release it beforehand. Jonny Lipsham demanded that they hold until a release with bagpipes. That's hilarious. That's very funny. Let's see. Dave says bagpipes shoot. All you need is a fat goose to squeeze. No, bagpipes are not made with a goose. That would be interesting though. I wonder what sound you'd get with a goose instead of a pig. Yes. Yeah, bagpipes are not particularly kosher, I've got to say. Billy Morgan says bagpipes killed by the guitarist. Now, interesting you should say that. There's a band here in Scotland called the Red Hot Chili Pipers. And they are a rock band, and they are amazing because they play rock stuff, rock tunes, very familiar rock songs, but they have like, I think it's like 2 guitars, bass, and drums, but they also have like 2 bagpipes. It might even be 3 bagpipes, actually, 3 bagpipe players. They are actually really, really good. You know, for as much as I hate the sound of bagpipes, you know, they just give me a headache. Other than that, when I go and see, because I've seen the Red Hot Chili Pipers 3, maybe 4 times now, and every time I've seen them, they are fecking awesome. They are totally mind-blowing. They are really, really good. And they basically play bagpipes in a way I didn't think was possible. And then there's this weird looking lady on YouTube who played bagpipes on a blues tune with a big band. And I didn't think that was possible with Highland pipes. I knew you could do it with Irish Alean pipes because I played in a band where we did that with Irish Alean pipes when I was a teenager. And he could play proper blues on the Alean pipes, but not with like traditional Highland pipes. Didn't think it was possible, but she somehow makes it happen, and it's amazing actually. Neil says bagpipes were steadily loud centuries before the distortion pedal was ever invented. Most definitely, because they had to be heard on the battlefield, over and above the sound of artillery being fired and shells exploding. They had to be heard because bagpipes were used in combat to direct what was going on. So a battalion commander, if he wanted to command his battalion and direct them to specific maneuvers, he would ask his piper to play a particular melody, and then his battalion they'd hear the melody, they'd recognize it, and they'd know exactly what it means and what they need to do when they hear that particular melody. And that's why they were invented. Largely, they were not invented for, hey, let's just, hang out and play some tunes around the campfire. No, that's not what they were invented for. They were designed to be very loud, and they were designed for the battlefield. In fact, they were used on D-Day. During the D-Day landings on the British beaches, the Scottish regiments, like the Highland Fusiliers and Black Watch, when they left their landing craft and came and went onto the beaches, immediately under artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire from the German positions, the the first person out of the landing craft, the first Scottish person on the beach was a bagpiper. And he just walked steadily up the beach as if, nothing was happening at all. And the Germans wouldn't shoot at him. They wouldn't shoot at him. They wouldn't shell him because they were kind of a bit scared of the bagpipes, to be honest. So and I think he won the military cross for basically just walking completely up towards German positions without receiving a single scratch, because the Germans didn't want to shoot him because they were a little bit scared of the bagpipes. And he just walked up the beach, and the Scottish regiments were the first to land on the British beaches on D-Day, and they kind of went mental on D-Day, and that's how particularly the Black Watch in World War II, they already had a reputation. The Germans knew that Black Watch were very scary, very intimidating, and very formidable because, they had encounters. The Germans had encounters with Black Watch in, earlier parts of the war, like in North Africa and in Italy. Yeah, and they always went with pipers first. And the pipers rarely ever got shot at. So there you go. And Just Bob has posted a live sample of the Red Hot Chili Pipers. Yes. As soon as this show is done, by way of preparing you to go to Billy's Studio One meetup, which will be happening right after this show, go watch just a wee bit of the Red Hot Chili Pipers live. You will love it, even if rock music's not your thing. It really isn't my thing, but those guys are freaking awesome. I try and get out to see them whenever I can because they are just so good. They are fantastic. I would love to sit in with them either on bass or on drums. That would be freaking awesome. All right, so there we go. That's the end of the show, guys. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for the questions, especially about signal flow and that kind of thing. That was a good question. Hang on one second. Yeah, you guys are great. Thank you so much for all of the likes. We peaked at around about 25, I think. Let me just check. Yeah, we peaked at 25, which is about average for what we get on a Sunday Night Live. I would love to have more people here. So if you know people for whom you think that either Sunday Night Live or Songwriting Simplified are going to be good for them, of value to them, please do tell them about the channel. Get them subscribed and get them along to either of the two shows. I would appreciate it a lot. We are getting close, by the way, to 5,800 subscribers, which means we are only just a little bit over 200 away from hitting 6,000 subscribers. So there are a couple of milestones that we're getting a little bit close to. Number one is the 400th Sunday Night Live show. That's coming up fast. What show did we did? I have to scroll back and see what show it was that Carl said we were on. Let me go and see. 379. Yeah, so this is 379. So we are not far away from 400, but we're also not far away. Excuse me. We're also not far away from 6,000 subscribers. I'm pretty sure the 400th show will come first before we get to the 6,000 subscribers, but please do help me out and get some more people in here, get some more people subscribed to the channel. If you're watching right now and you've just stumbled across this show, welcome. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you watched. I hope you found some of this really useful and helpful. If you have, hit that subscribe button, because there are more shows. I do these shows twice a week. But I've also got a whole bunch of regular tutorial videos on the channel, and I've got more of those coming this year. I've got a whole bunch more videos, some of which are already in the can, ready to get loaded up. They will be coming very soon, so keep an eye out for those. If you're interested in Fender Studio, there's a live show I did a few weeks back for that, so if you want to find out all about that, you can go check that out there as well. That live stream, by the way, has already had nearly 2,000 views. That's crazy. For one of my shows to have like 2,000 views. That's awesome. All right, folks, thanks a lot. I will see you on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified. Have a great start to your week. Good night, everybody. Oops. There we go. Don't forget, Billy's Studio One meetup starting in just a minute. Thanks, guys.